following program on Ada Derana 24 is classified for general audience. It is intended for all ages. It contains little or no violence, no strong language, and little or no sexual dialogue or situations.
A very good evening and thank you for joining us on yet another episode of Business Best here on Ada Derana 24, where we bring to you the best in the business and change makers in the entrepreneurial and business landscape. Specifically, this time's topic is something that not only affects the business landscape, but also you and I that are watching at home and the rest of the future of this entire region. And that's on solar energy and the future of solar energy and its development specifically in the Asia-Pacific region as well. To speak about this, we have someone that is, I believe, the best suited for this specific program, and that is Mr. Ashish Khanna, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here on our program today. And a bit of context, Mr. Ashish Khanna is the Director General of the ISA, and today we're going to be talking about specifically on the 7th meeting of the ISA Regional Committee for Asia and the Pacific region. So specifically our region and what we can see as a solar future. Now I am talking all about these, solar futures and solar energy, but really I think it's best if we can get some context from the man himself that's actually, here to look over this entire meeting. Can you give our viewers and can you give us a little bit of an introduction into what exactly the ISA is and what its mission and vision is. Also on what you are doing as an individual that is, one of the key leaders of these projects. Can you lead us in, sir?
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. International Solar Alliance is possibly the largest Global South multilateral agency. It's a treaty-based organization that has now 124 countries as members. And what is our objective? Our objective is to share experiences, bring together policy and regulatory reforms for attracting private sector investment, bring in a lot of capacity building so that countries can develop their own solutions, understand what different technologies may mean for today and for future, and have a very integrated, holistic pathways for getting solar energy investments in their own countries. So it's a very comprehensive set of aspects that we deal with, and I'm very fortunate. I took over in March as a new Director General. I've spent about 7 years in private sector and last 20 years in World Bank across 25 countries in Asia, Middle East and Africa. And now I'm here as Asia Pacific Regional Committee, where Sri Lanka is hosting all the Asia Pacific countries.
That's really interesting to hear, specifically considering your expertise in this sector as well and how you have progressed to where you are now in the current standpoint. I want to ask you, sir, a question of curiosity now. Since being appointed as Director General of this alliance, I want to ask you what exactly drove you to be a part of this initiative and how essential is an initiative like the ISA for our region specifically?
So, you see, last year, $2.2 trillion got invested in clean energy. That is for the first time much more than total investments in fossil fuels. So that's great. And countries are doing it not only for climate change commitments, but because it makes economic sense. The cost of solar has come down by 70%. The cost of batteries coming down. As we are seeing in all developing countries, urban mobility is on two-wheelers and three-wheelers based on batteries. So there's a fundamental revolution in which solar, batteries, EVs are getting intertwined in our lives. So I'm very excited by what this means for developing countries and Global South. And I see it as a great opportunity, as a platform for learning from each other, seeing how to attract private sector investment, and essentially lead to jobs and lead to energy transition that is rooted in the context of their own countries. So that space is what excited me for International Solar Alliance.
Exactly. It's very important that you point out the fact that we have seen a recent boom when it comes to the support backing clean energy and solar energy, and even when it comes to new energy vehicles as well, specifically in our country, in Sri Lanka's context as well, solar power, the support for solar energy, even leasing schemes, and basically the general public's ability to access solar energy and therefore have a trickle-down effect. We're really seeing it in current day. And that leads me to my question of why the 7th regional meeting for the Asia Pacific is happening, for the ISA specifically, is happening in Sri Lanka. Can you tell us what is special about this specific meeting?
So the way we are structured, we try and bring all the countries of a particular region together once a year to look at what's unique and what's the right strategy and implementation support for that region. And Sri Lanka is the vice president for Asia and Pacific. Also, it is a unique country, which is an island, and has huge ambitions to increase renewables, have energy transition, bring down the cost of energy so that the youth, the women can be part of this journey, the industries can become more competitive. But it is also linked to some of the other themes that we want to talk about in the 7th RCM here. And one of them is on regional interconnections. There is a huge opportunity for Sri Lanka to get interconnected to India and therefore for the entire South Asia market. We are also looking at new technologies like green hydrogen, because it is very important for countries like Sri Lanka to find their own pathways for what does new technologies host, including startups. We are having a separate session having the youth-based startups look at where they are and what will it take for those startups to become big ideas. So I think it's a combination where Sri Lanka has a huge ambition on renewables. It wants to have regional interconnection. It wants to get new technologies. It wants to build its own capability and also have youth-led startups. That has led us to here.
Exactly. That is a very big feat as well. It's no simple task considering just how many objectives this specific meeting hopes to achieve when it comes to the future and laying a foundation for a better solar future for this entire region. Now, I want to draw our attention to the theme of this year's, since we are already talking about it, I want to talk about the fact that the theme is advancing solar cooperation across a region of diversity and opportunity. You mentioned what plans we have for this specific meeting to take place. Can you walk us through a little bit more of the detailed plans of what we're hoping as outcomes, not just in an abstract sense, but what we can expect to see as actionable results?
So let's look at how diverse the continent is. We have small island developing states called SIDS, largely the Pacific countries. And almost 7 ministers from those Pacific countries are coming together because all of them have diesel-based generation as their primary source of generation, in some countries costing as much as 2% of their GDP. So we are trying to bring all the SIDS country together on an aggregated platform for doing procurement of solar and batteries. Why aggregation? Because if each country does its own small thing, the private sector is not interested in small ideas. Once we aggregate all the countries to come together on an aggregated procurement platform, doing an aggregate kind of some risk mitigation support and a digital platform for bidding, all of those together on e-procurement, digitization and regional markets will elicit some of the best private sector to come. We are really hoping that all the SIDS countries will come together and sign a declaration for moving ahead. So that's a very concrete agenda. The second part of the concrete agenda is what does regional interconnections mean as part of energy security? As I mentioned before, India-Sri Lanka is a very viable sense of a long-term energy security where Sri Lanka can tap India and the entire South Asia market. But we will also hear from other countries like Nepal and Bhutan and Bangladesh, but then also Greater Mekong countries of Vietnam and Laos, who also have a lot of regional interconnections. So there will be a very concrete agenda on that. The third important pillar is that each country must have its own local capability to take forward. in this own context rather than being told by someone else. So we are going to sign a country partnership framework with Sri Lanka that will then lay out a clear pathway for next 3 to 5 years on clear milestones of how we are going to partner with Sri Lanka on all aspects of solar, batteries and EVs over the next 3 to 5 years. And one of the interesting agendas on that is to set up a center of excellence that can develop capability for doing tendering, for testing, for startups based out of Sri Lanka. It's called Solar Technology Application Resource Centers, and we really hope to help Sri Lanka develop its own center of excellence. And finally, we will end by talking about new technologies on green hydrogen, where Sri Lanka is one of the deep dive countries for having a detailed policy roadmap for what would new technologies mean for Sri Lanka. So it's a very concrete agenda with very clear milestones, and we are very happy to have this partnership.
Exactly. Now we know that the path ahead, I'm sure the viewers understand just how concretely everything has been structured out, and it's not just, most of the time when we hear that regional cooperation meetings are being held, we tend to see a lot of grand gestures, but we don't see actionable results or plans, especially mission plans, when it comes to bringing these ideas into fruition for the benefit of not just our country but also our region. And considering, Mr. Khanna, what you just mentioned, we can actually expect to see quite a lot of change in the coming years, as this can be some sort of foundation that we're laying right now. Now, when it comes to what you just previously mentioned as well, centers of excellence, aggregating actually ensuring that our countries in itself are not just, small part manufacturers, and it's not just basically disconnected. We can become somewhat of, a coalition of a sort. I'm sure there's more to work out in the future. But the risk factor involved when it comes to investing in solar energy is still something that the private sector is a little wary about. How does regional meetings such as this and the ISA in itself ensure that this sort of, the solar investment aspect, how exactly does the de-risking area really go about? Do we see any sort of, communication in, where the private sector is actually actively reciprocating with the safety nets that we might be providing, or are we going to have to go a very long way for that?
So, no, that's a good point. There are two parts to this question, if I may. The first is, what do private sector in any country really want? And based on my extensive private sector experience, I feel the private sector is always interested in two things: a detailed long-term clarity on the policy framework and the regulatory framework, and any protection that in case the policy or the regulatory framework changes, how am I going to be protected contractually? So as a first level, we offer policy and regulatory support to countries for having the right frameworks to attract private sector. That's something that we will discuss during the RCM. Then secondly, even after the policy and regulatory framework, there is some risk mitigation support that private sector wants. So International Solar Alliance has set up a global solar facility. We are starting with Africa because that's where probably the risks are very high. We are coming up with a $200 million facility that will provide risk mitigation blended finance support for private sector to invest in distributed renewable energy. But for the RCM here in Colombo, when we sign the SIDS declaration, we are really hoping that agencies such as MIGA, World Bank Group, ADB can come at a portfolio level of risk mitigation support that will come and help private sector start investing in a much more structured way. So in summary, what I'm saying is the right combination of policy and regulatory support and risk mitigation can go a long way in bringing private sector investment.
Right, so that's a very promising aspect as well. It's a good combination in order to attract the private sector and ensure that the private sector stays and doesn't pull out, because that's usually a big problem that we see when it comes to new technology and emerging concepts. There's always the lack of confidence when it comes to what we can expect in the future and the ROI and what's involved in it. We do have to talk about the new concepts, especially relating to green hydrogen. That's a very important area that we can dive into when it comes to this topic. Before we get into any of those specifics, let's take a very short commercial break. You're watching Business Best. We'll be right back. right, welcome back to Business Best. We're in conversation with Mr. Ashish Khanna, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance. Now, previously, we had a very interesting conversation on laying the groundwork and understanding on what ISA is and what it plans to do in our region. Thank you very much, sir, for that previous segment. I believe our viewers got quite a bit of understanding. But now moving on to the more current questions that I have relating to the technological aspects. Green hydrogen is something you have mentioned specifically previously, and also the energy storage aspect. When it comes to the feasibility of developing such technologies, how exactly is the ISA hoping to integrate these very new concepts, well, not very new, but fairly new to our region, these concepts? How do we plan to integrate it into our already existing infrastructure? Is there a plan in place? Are there maybe actionable goals that we can see that will be taken? And also, of course, relaying it back, considering the nature of our program, how exactly will the private sector be given information and safety in regards to, de-risking emerging new technologies?
First of all, each country must understand how it wants to balance new technologies and existing technologies. So as Sri Lanka has a huge program on solar rooftops that we all know about, going into large-scale, utility-scale solar, it is very important that Sri Lanka also takes a viewpoint on all new technologies. That includes green hydrogen. It could include other new technologies on storage, as you mentioned. It could also mean electric mobility. That's going to be the future of urban transport in developing countries like Sri Lanka. It could also mean technologies that are even much more at conceptual stage, like solid-state batteries or perovskite, which is a new form of solar panels. We believe that it is very important to have a set of advisory services where countries first must take an informed viewpoint of what should they be doing about new technologies. And therefore, we are hoping to start a new vertical on technology policy and roadmaps that will provide this advice to countries so that they can understand by themselves what viewpoint on policies they should be taking. Now, once that viewpoint is taken, there has to be a roadmap. So we are also going to offer technical assistance on what would a roadmap on green hydrogen would look like. And Sri Lanka is one of our deep dive countries that over the next 5 to 10 years, if Sri Lanka wants to be a country, to be a source of green hydrogen for the world, what are the steps that will need to be taken? So we are really hoping to be able to help Sri Lanka and other countries take both these steps.
And the very important point that you mentioned previously, sir, relating to the centers of excellence, I believe, star centers, I believe is what it's accurately named at the moment. Can you tell us now, this is a very novel concept considering, of course, we have the concept of service centers located in different parts of the globe, but this is not entirely just a service center. It's a manufacturing center. It could be a hub for solar energy specifically in each country. Can you explain to us what exactly the concept of a star center is, a little bit more detailed, so that our viewers can understand, and specifically how that plans to maybe give back to the economy that it is going to be established in?
So each country is very unique of what it wants to do on energy security and energy transition. A STAR-C, a Solar Technology Applications Resource Center, will make a business plan for what should that particular university's center of excellence in solar focus on. For example, in countries that are doing a lot of work on distributed renewable energy, there can be a lot of focus on testing equipments, developing training programs for people who are going to do operations and maintenance. Because there are a lot of jobs on clean energy required to operations, maintenance, civil structures, and others. And then there is a whole pathway for having startups and incubation. So depending on each country's context, the STAR-C will make a business plan of what all trainings, what all capacity building, startup programs, labs, and testing is really required. And that's something that we will do over the next couple of months once we sign the agreement with Sri Lanka during this RCM. We are now realizing a much more fundamental transformation is going to happen in the world, and that is the energy and the digital worlds are going to get intertwined. The way all of us now go to Amazon and e-websites, Similarly, in next 5 to 10 years, energy sector may get completely changed by you and I having battery and solar rooftop may start trading energy with each other. So we are also thinking that also because we are based in India, which is the digital superpower house of the world, why don't we develop a digital cutting edge knowledge that can then be given to all our 124 member countries, and countries like in Sri Lanka can use that for digital leapfrogging. This is possible through a global capability center that will become the hub for all the spokes of national centers. So that is a dream and an ambition for next 5 years. Can we create digital solutions to help all the smaller countries, developing countries, do the digital leapfrogging, including through the National Centers of Excellence?
That is a very important point, specifically considering small island developing states, as you mentioned. SIDS specifically are in a precarious position when it comes to any sort of development, especially when it comes to areas like solar energy and new energy and the concepts that arise. We might be a little bit slower to pick up on it considering our geography and our economy. What you mentioned could potentially revolutionize how small island developing states, well, it's not just them, but mainly them, actually tend to accelerate when it comes to their infrastructural development or economic development or even development as a people. This specific digital integration that we're talking about, I want to dig a little bit deeper into it. Now, there is a proposition relating to the ISA's e-marketplace, as you mentioned, and the SIDS platform that you have. How exactly can we see it being taken up and developed in the next few years? Will we be able to see something beginning in Sri Lanka, maybe? Not just directly trading energy, I'm sure that's a bit far away, but initializing this e-marketplace and having it actively function in a country like Sri Lanka. Is it feasible? Will we see it maybe in the next few years?
It's definitely feasible. How long will it take will be something that we'll be discussing with authorities in Sri Lanka as part of the country partnership framework. One of the offerings we believe is very important for all island states, including Sri Lanka, Pacific, Caribbean, is to do e-marketplace, which is nothing but digital tendering. It's now very standard. A neighboring country, India, has developed 110 gigawatts. It's now the world's third largest solar market in the world. $150 billion, all done competitively and tendered. So it's very easy to take that experience to all other countries of doing a transparent digital tendering process to get the best value for the country and its people in driving down the price as much as possible. And I think that's possible for SIDS because that's exactly the idea for doing an aggregate procurement. But that would be on offer for Sri Lanka as well, as Sri Lanka has a huge program of doing 2,000 megawatt or solar utility-based tenders as well.
So what I'm understanding from this is in the near future, we could see a lot of interconnection, cross-border connections from not just India, but also the rest of the member states and specifically in the APAC region as well. Now, when it comes to what you mentioned, so the reducing of the energy costs and the collaboration, specifically when it comes to the Asia and the Pacific, how does the ISA play its role in ensuring this kind of interconnectivity thrives and we see a development and it's not just a stagnant connection that maybe will yield little to no results? How exactly is the ISA keeping it relevant and keeping it actionable and keeping it resultful?
So you see, you must understand why regional interconnections are the way forward. What are the benefits? As countries do a lot more solar, one of the things that I'm hearing across countries, in all continents that I go, how do we manage our evening peak? Because when you and I, after work, go back to home and switch on the ACs, in most countries, the peak of the system happens once the sun sets down. Now, all of them, therefore, will eventually have to do a lot more battery or other forms of energy storage. But regional interconnections can bring down the demand or capital expenditure because not everyone faces the evening peak at the same time. So when you need it, you can actually buy it from the neighbor. When that party needs, it can be interconnected. India tomorrow can be interconnected to Middle East. And when India has a peak, you buy from Middle East. When Sri Lanka has a peak, you buy it from India. So this whole regional interconnection can bring down the capital expenditure in addition to energy security. That today, if something happens to the system and there is a problem, if you have connectivity with a very vast market next doors, it brings in a lot of security that at least the wires will keep running and the lights will keep on. So both in terms of cost. Now let me tell you another cost. A new diesel-based power plant in Sri Lanka probably is going to cost around 17 to 20 US cents. But if you look at the wholesale power market in India, it costs roughly about 7 to 8 US cents. Even if you add all the cost of the transmission, it's going to be a win-win for that power to now come to Sri Lanka, avoiding all the diesel-based new capacity that Sri Lanka needs. So limited battery storage, energy security, and lowering the cost. So regional interconnections can really benefit the continent as a whole.
Exactly. Unfortunately, we are running out of time in this specific segment, but I'd really enjoy this discussion specifically because of just what kind of development it holds for Sri Lanka in its future as well. It's not just the business landscape, it's not just infrastructure, it could be the future of our people as well. Before we head off and before we wrap things up, so is there anything else you'd like to mention to our viewers in relation to solar energy moving forward?
I just want to say that we owe it to our children. I have a 14-year-old, and given what's happening on weather imperfections, the heat, it is a moral duty to leave a better world to our children, and more importantly for our youth. And that's where a lot of support in looking at newer solutions, in looking at innovation, that is the need of the hour. And we are here to help Sri Lanka and all the countries, and we are very proud that Sri Lanka is leading Asia Pacific Regional Committee meeting. So wonderful to be here.
All right, thank you very much once again for taking the time to join us on our program here today. I believe our viewers had quite the insightful experience when it comes to solar energy and the future of energy in our region specifically and in Sri Lanka and what we can expect moving forward, especially with cooperation with the International Solar Alliance. Thank you very much, Mr. Ashish Khanna, the Director General of the International Solar Alliance, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you once again, sir, for coming here for our program today and spending some time with us to actually explain to our viewers just how essential this area is when it comes to the development of Sri Lanka, not just for the infrastructure, but also for the people. Really honored to have you here. And with that, we have come to the end of this program. If you had missed any of today's programs, you can always rewatch by catching us on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Ada Derana English. And please do send your feedback to us over at feedback.ad24english@derana.lk or via WhatsApp at 076-805-7933. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Anuradha Vikramasinghe. Have a good night.